At the beginning of the movie, Father Brennan arrives at a church undergoing renovation. He then meets Father Harris, who gives Brennan a photograph of a baby with the name Sienna inscribed on it. Brennan comments that the child looks so human, to which Harris replies, "Don't let yourself be fooled. She wasn't conceived naturally." In a flashback, we see a devoted girl who volunteered to give birth to the baby. Her mouth is covered with a black cloth, and she is strapped to a bed. Harris explains that the pregnancy progressed rapidly. The baby will be in her teens now, and they are just waiting until she's old enough. Brennan asks, "Old enough for what?" But Harris says he can't do this anymore. In another flashback, we see the girl pleading, "Don't let it touch me again." A demonic growl approaches the girl, and Brennan notices that Harris has disappeared. Brennan rushes out of the church looking for him, telling Harris that hiding won't absolve his sins. Harris responds, saying he doesn't want to be forgiven but wants it all to be over, and that Brennan will understand soon enough. Suddenly, glass breaks and falls from above, and a metal pole hits Harris on the head. Brennan asks if he's okay, to which Harris replies that he is fine. However, as he turns to leave, Brennan is shocked to see something horrifying. The pole has split Harris's head open, and Harris smiles before dying. In Rome, 1971, American novitiate Margaret Dano arrives at the airport, where she meets Cardinal Lawrence. As they travel to the Vizardelli orphanage, it is revealed that Margaret is there to take the veil. The cardinal informs her about the ongoing protests against the rejection of authority, including the church. After a while, they finally reach the orphanage, where Cardinal Lawrence introduces Margaret to Abbess Sister Silva, who warmly welcomes her to their family. Silva takes Margaret on a tour of the orphanage, explaining that they care for 62 girls, and that the state has contracted them to take in many unmarried women who are about to give birth. Sister Silva then introduces Sister Angelica to Margaret, explaining that Angelica was abandoned on their front steps as a very ill child. Despite her difficult beginnings, Angelica is now deeply devoted and ensures all the children are kept smiling. Just then, they hear a girl screaming, and Sister Silva goes to check. While waiting, Margaret notices a drawing on a pinboard that depicts a girl floating above 5 other girls, with the names Carlita and Sienna written on it. Curious, Margaret opens the door to a nearby room and sees a girl drawing something. Margaret tries to talk to her and introduce herself, but the girl does not respond. Instead, she slowly moves toward Margaret, suddenly grabbing her and starting to lick her. Margaret pushes her away, and only then Sister Silva arrives. Margaret learns that the girl's name is Carlita, and that she is the one who made the drawing on the pinboard outside. Carlita gives her another drawing of hers, and Silva takes Margaret away. Margaret is then dropped off at her home, where she looks at the drawing Carlita gave her. The next morning, while she is praying, Margaret gets a bit scared when she hears someone trying to open the door and overhears 2 women talking. Soon after, a nun appears, terrifying her, and only then does her roommate Luz enter the house. Later, Luz asks Margaret how she ended up in Italy to take the veil, to which Margaret explains that Cardinal Lawrence was a priest at the orphanage where she grew up, and they became quite close because she was a problem child. She adds that she used to see things and get so convinced sometimes that it was all real. But then Cardinal came to the orphanage, and he helped her to see that all that stuff was just in her head. Luz tells her that for her, it was a voice. She recounts how she was kicked out of her house at the age of 16. It was an exceptionally cold night, and she had nowhere to go. Suddenly, a warm wind enveloped her, and she heard a voice surrounding her and even resonating within her. The voice reassured her, telling her that it didn't matter if she had no earthly home, because her true home was with him. The next night, Margaret notices that Carlita is not in her bed. Concerned, she goes to find her, and is shocked to discover a nun strapping Carlita to a bed in another room. Another nun then shuts the door, and as Margaret processes this, she hears a woman laughing and sees a nun who starts crying the next moment. Suddenly, Luz scares her and tells her that she has something to show her tonight. Luz takes Margaret to a disco so she can experience life freely before taking the veil. After a while, 2 boys named Alfonso and Paolo approach them and invite them to dance. Margaret dances with Paolo, and after some time, she starts to kiss and lick him before blacking out. The next day, Luz tells Margaret what she did last night, but Margaret has no memory of what happened. Later, Father Brennan approaches Margaret and introduces himself. He tells her it's about the girl Sienna and warns her to be very careful, because evil things will start to happen around her. Margaret tries to leave, but he insists she meet him tonight so he can explain everything. Later, Margaret notices that Carlita is nowhere to be seen, and a little girl tells her that she is in the bad room. Margaret immediately goes to Sister Silva and tells her that Carlita is locked in a room, to which Silva explains that Carlita bit Sister Romano that morning, so she had to be sent to the bad room. Margaret asks why there is a bad room, to which Silva responds, because some girls are bad. Margaret starts to empathize with Carlita and attempts to console her through conversation. She shares that she once felt similar to Carlita, but admires her lack of fear. Just then, they hear a scream, prompting Margaret to rush out and instructing Carlita to retreat to her room. Upon entering, Margaret sees a pregnant woman screaming in pain. Gradually, the girl's screams subside, replaced by an eerie smile creeping across her face. Following this, the woman unexpectedly laughs and looks at Margaret. However, shortly after, she resumes screaming, and to Margaret's horror, she witnesses a demonic hand emerging from that woman's vagina, causing Margaret to lose consciousness instantly. Later, Margaret spots Carlita with Angelica, and as she approaches them, Angelica reveals the drawing Carlita had shared with her. It depicts a pregnant woman being restrained, and Angelica points to a specific part of the drawing, indicating it's hers, and that it represents a boy. Margaret suggests it's not very appropriate, and this comment angers Angelica, prompting her to leave. However, she returns and suddenly kisses Margaret before leaving again. After a while, they spot Angelica on the balcony. She tells Margaret that it's all for her before she self-immolates and jumps, ultimately hanging herself. That evening, Margaret visits Father Brennan and recounts the incident that occurred at the orphanage. Brennan explains that there are two types of church, one that adheres to the teachings of Christ, which they are part of, and another that turns a blind eye to torture and murder, all in pursuit of supreme power. Radicals within the church, threatened by the ascent of secularism, aim to summon the Antichrist to instill fear and compel people back to the church. She asks what any of this has to do with Carlita, to which he tells her that he was excommunicated and that the photograph is his sole lead, suspecting the depicted baby girl to be the future mother of the Antichrist. Carlita would have been born on the 6th day of the 6th month at 6 a.m., and 666 is the mark of the devil, which she will have on her body. He tells her that they are keeping her files at the orphanage, and he needs her to get them to him because he needs to know how Carlita was born. He explains that there is a beast they are mating, a jackal. Margaret begins to leave there, but he tells her that if Carlita is the mother, the evil inside her will do whatever it takes to stop them, so they must destroy it at all costs. However, despite his plea, Margaret remains unconvinced and refuses to help him. The following day, during a field trip, Margaret questions Carlita about whether anyone has ever done something that might have frightened or upset her. Carlita responds that sometimes she experiences a sense of unease. She admits to seeing things but struggles to discern their reality. Margaret shares her own experience, revealing that she used to have dreadful visions when she was younger. She explains that she was once convinced of their reality, but eventually learned that those thoughts were merely deceitful illusions. Carlita walks away, insisting that what she sees isn't a lie. When Margaret goes after her, she finds Carlita sitting near a window. A nun's hand touches Carlita's back, and to Margaret's horror, she realizes it's Angelica. Suddenly, Sister Silva arrives and informs Margaret that a riot has broken out, urging them to leave. On their way back to the bus, Margaret gets caught in the crowd. Suddenly, a demon grabs her shoulder and begins licking her face. Later that night, Sister Silva tells Margaret that she and Father Lawrence believe it might be time for her to take a step back and perhaps postpone her vows. When Margaret asks why, Sister Silva explains that being around Carlita might not be good for her, and they suspect that Margaret herself is becoming ill due to her proximity to Carlita. She orders her to keep her distance from Carlita, or there will be consequences. On her way back home, Margaret encounters Paolo, who tries to flee from her and begs her to stop following him. Horrified, he tells her to look for the mark before an oncoming truck fatally strikes him. Margaret rushes to him and urgently asks the crowd to call an ambulance. She reassures him that he will be fine and attempts to pull him to safety. However, a girl's scream pierces the air, and Margaret realizes with horror that Paolo's body has been severed into 2 parts. The next day, while Luz takes her veil and everyone is present, Margaret sneaks into Sister Silva's office to look for Carlita's file. Instead, she uncovers a hidden door that leads to an underground chamber. There, she discovers a series of subject files, all labeled CM. Each file contains a photo of a disfigured baby with a birthmark in the shape of 3 sixes, with Carlita appearing to be the only survivor. Margaret rushes out with the files, and she brings Carlita into a room and apologizes to her for not trusting her, but she believes her now. Just then, Sister Silva along with other nuns breaks in, and Margaret confronts them, declaring that she knows what they are doing and what they have done with the babies. However, the nuns catch her and knock her to the floor, and when Carlita tries to intervene, Margaret spots the mark of 3 6s on Carlita's palate. The nun then throws and locks her in the bedroom. After some time, Margaret hears whispering in the room, and when she checks under the bed, she finds a drawing that Carlita had likely made. She immediately removes the carpet and is shocked to see another drawing beneath it. Seeing this drawing triggers a series of visions for Margaret, revealing the horrifying truth that the women are being impregnated with the help of a beast, forced to give birth to children destined to bring the Antichrist into the world. She tries to convince herself that this is not real, but then she hears someone's voice in the room and sees Angelica's ghost in a corner of the room who slowly starts moving towards her. Margaret gets terrified by this, but just then Gabriel comes there and tells her that he has found the files and they have to go now. They visit Father Brennan and Gabriel hands him the files. It's revealed that Brennan had previously approached Gabriel, but Gabriel had dismissed him as crazy. Margaret insists they must retrieve Carlita, but Gabriel warns that it's not safe. Brennan agrees, stating that once they learn they have the files, they will come for them, and the only way forward is to prove what they have done. Otherwise, no one will believe a word they say. As they examine the files, Brennan explains that after all these years and so many failures, they believe the only solution is for the beast to mate with its offspring. Margaret scrutinizes the photo and notices a mark on the baby's head. She points out that Carlita doesn't have the mark on her head, but on her palate, concluding that the baby in the photo is not Carlita. They proceed to examine all the other files, and Margaret comes across one with no photo in it, realizing that the photo they had was taken from the same file. As Margaret carefully examines the photo, she recalls Paolo's final words before his death. Suddenly, a chilling memory resurfaces, and she remembers being forcefully impregnated in a satanic ritual by the beast on the night she blacked out at the disco. This revelation shocks Margaret, and she begins to cry. Gabriel and Brennan try to calm her down, and Brennan checks her scalp, and to his shock, he discovers the mark 666. He explains that she has been a ward of the church her entire life, and they must have moved her around to cover their tracks. Realizing that Carlita must be too young, they brought Margaret back to Rome. Margaret attempts to leave, but Brennan explains that she can't leave. He adds that it's June 6th, midnight, indicating that they will be coming for her imminently. Margaret declares that if she is indeed pregnant, she needs it out of her immediately. The group rushes off to seek medical intervention for the abortion, but Margaret's health rapidly deteriorates during the journey. And suddenly, another car crashes into theirs, resulting in the tragic deaths of everyone except Margaret. As Margaret emerges from the wreckage, strange movements begin to convulse through her body, and after a moment, her abdomen suddenly swells, as if her womb is rapidly filling. She awakens strapped to a hospital bed and is greeted by Cardinal Lawrence, the head of the conspiracy. He tells her that the baby she's about to bear will redeem the church and bring the people back to God. They then take her to the labor room, where she gives birth to 2 children, a girl and a boy. The doctor hands the boy to Sister Silva, and everyone present gently touches his forehead in a solemn ritual. Margaret asks Lawrence if can he hold her son, to which Silva says she is right, as a child needs to bond with its mother. She hands him the boy and says she did so well. Margaret suddenly stabs Lawrence in his neck, which shocks everyone present there, but she cannot bring herself to kill her son. Silva snatches the boy from her, and Luz stabs Margaret, causing her to collapse. The conspirators flee with the boy, leaving Margaret and the newborn girl behind, and Sister Silva orders to burn everything to cover their tracks. Carlita emerges as Margaret's unexpected savior, rescuing her and her daughter from the perilous situation. As Margaret looks back at the engulfing flames, she catches a chilling glimpse of her assailant, an ominous, demonic jackal lurking within the inferno. The baby boy is given to American diplomat Robert Thorne to secretly replace the child his wife Catherine has supposedly miscarried. Years later, Margaret lives secluded in the mountains with Carlita and her daughter, now a happy family. However, their peace is shattered when Brennan reappears, warning Margaret that they know she is alive. He explains that none of them were supposed to survive, especially the girl, and they will come for her. Before leaving, he reveals that her son has been named Damien, and the movie